Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 38. Well, this one might be a bit of a boring one, not gonna lie. Sure, there will be combat here and there, but at this point the dark fog is a complete pushover, and that is mostly thanks to the fact that we left the difficulty on default. They are simply not leveling up fast enough, which makes even farming them a complete non-starter. If we ever revisit this game, we will likely play with a bit higher difficulty. Anyways, the majority of our time today will be centered around setting up those standalone shield generator outposts, and by the end we will manage to take care of a couple systems, which will make them 100% impervious to any further dark fog incursions. Before we get started, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will let me know that this video was worth making. If you want to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them, and for a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. But enough talking, let's get into it. As I've said, this video will be a bit of a slog, thanks to the fact that we will spend the entire time setting up those shield emitters. And once you've seen me do that once, you've seen it all. Normally I would fast forward through things like that, but it ended up being the entire recording, and I didn't want to just make a 10 minutes long time lapse, but I also didn't want to leave it at the usual 2 times speed, so I sped the footage up to 3 times the normal rate. Once we reach the point where I have nothing more to add to the proceedings, I will say so, with a timestamp to the moment where I will do the outro monologue. After that point, I highly doubt I will add any more commentary. Sure, I would love it if you watch the whole thing. YouTube loves it when people watch the entire video, but that's up to you. Anyways, let's get back to the matter at hand. While I was babbling, I got to work on removing the manufacturing towers for the components that are now moved to Minerva, meaning the magnetic coils, circuit boards, and of course the gears. I also fixed a small error I made when I moved the oil refinery in the science video a couple episodes back. I left the local distribution off, which starved the plastic production, which could have had a big impact on the broadband cable production. Thankfully we caught it in time, and it is now fine. And if you paid attention, I also decided that it was time to switch out the kind of ammo we have in the mecha. We've been using the most basic missiles until now, and that simply won't do anymore. We are going up against hives, and even the low-level ones are barely scratched by those. Instead, we will use the plasma cannon ammo from this point forward, and that will increase our overall damage output quite drastically. Sure, in ideal circumstances we would be using the upgraded ammo version, but that requires antimatter to make, and that is still a bit of a precious commodity right now, so I didn't want to waste too much of it just so we can have a bigger damage potential. Our main source of that will come from our space fleet anyways. The mecha is simply a small addition to it, so we might as well just have no ammo, and it would make little difference. I mean, sure, it is still important for ground-based combat, but when it comes to going up against hives, we might as well turn our turrets off, and just rely on the destroyers. Before we get to placing the shield emitters, we still need to finish setting up the Minerva factories. We already have 3 done, but we are still missing the electric motors. And as it turns out, the local resource deposits were just the right distance away to barely fit a tower on the intersection of the meridian points, so we can plop down things without issues. I think 4 towers will be enough for now. If I remember correctly, we had 2 of them on Juno, so adding these 4 will be able to produce more than the current output. While the construction is underway, I have some news. Since this series is getting close to its conclusion, we need to look for a possible replacement. As I've said a couple episodes ago, a new Workers and Resources series is definitely coming, but I didn't want it to be the only one, so it will be about 2 episodes per week. That leaves 2 more. And this is what I had in mind. How about we do another survival-based series? I loved my time doing the Stationeers one, and I just recently discovered a really neat little game called Vintage Story. I had no idea that game existed until a content creator called Radamant started playing it. At first glance, it just looked like another Minecraft clone. The aesthetics are almost like a texture mod for that old classic. But the game systems got me intrigued. As I've said, it's a survival game, with an unforgiving difficulty. Wild animals will be able to kill us in 2 or 3 hits early on, and we will constantly need to keep on top of our hunger to stay alive. At the beginning, we start out with nothing, and we need to make Stone Age tools to get going, slowly working our way up to iron technology. Since it's a survival game, I will likely end up doing live commentary again, like I did with Stationeers. It's been a while, so getting used to doing things like that will take some time, but I hope to get used to it over the series, and who knows, maybe I will get to a stage where I can stop using Poly once and for all. That would be quite a step forward. I've been relying on it for too long, and it really doesn't help me progress as a content creator if I keep using it. But that's just something that I would like to work toward, and Vintage Story just might be what pushes me over the edge. I remember getting ever so slightly better at doing live commentary during my time with Stationeers and Captain of Industry, and the only reason why I fell back into using Poly was because I caught the virus that shall not be named, and that left me with no voice for months, and an even longer prolonged cough, which made live commentary pretty much impossible. But I should be able to do it again. So, here's the plan. We will conclude this series once the sphere is complete, and we have nothing new to add. After that, we will get started on a Workers and Resources series, which will come out twice a week, and it will still use Poly for commentary. But, we will also do a Vintage Story series alongside that, where I will likely use my own voice so I can practice. Anyways, the electric motor factories are done building on Minerva, and I just set the old towers on Juno to start emptying out. And here comes the part where I will start setting up the shield emitters. The first obvious target is of course Lambda Leonis. We have a few places there that are still not fully protected. We have some gaps in the shield coverage, so we can use this new method to plug those holes. Basically, we will go around, and if there is a missing emitter, or we find one that isn't hooked up to the local power grid, we will replace it with the new blueprint. We just need to make sure that the emitter itself is in the correct position. The support infrastructure can be in any orientation. Unfortunately, I forgot to stock up on a couple important buildings, namely the fusion reactors. Those are what will generate the power for the emitter. A quick hop back to Juno was necessary as a result, so we can pick up a couple stacks to use. So, here's the basic setup. A planetary logistics tower, which will bring in Deuteron fuel cells from a local interplanetary station. Since we have those at the poles, we can just tell it to bring the fuel cells from Juno, and distribute them locally. Then, those cells are fed into a pair of fusion reactors. I decided to use 2 of them, so the charging of the emitter is faster. Sure, the overall power consumption goes down as the batteries get charged up, but the initial power draw is quite substantial. So placing 2 will get through that warm-up period faster. The only real drawback of this is that you will need to carry a couple fuel cells with you to boot up the outposts. Without power, the inserters cannot move the fuel cells from the belt, so we need to manually insert some rods to prime the system. But after that, it should be good to go. As long as the interstellar tower can keep up with the supply, it will be fine. Early on in this setup, I used a single fuel cell to start things up, but sometimes that ended up falling a bit too short, and the reactor would use it all up before the first delivery could arrive, especially if we do this on a completely empty planet, and it would take a while for the first big shipment of cells to arrive in the main distribution center. So after a while, I started putting 2 cells into the reactors as a starter, and that seemed to be enough. And we are out of planetary towers. We will need to make a trip back to Juno to restock. And this is pretty much where I have nothing more to add. This is what we will do for the remainder of the episode. There will be some combat here and there, and we will destroy the dark fog hive in the Mizar system, but that's about it. So, if you would like to skip to the end where I do the usual outro monologue about upcoming projects in the series, I included a timestamp on the screen. While it will likely impact the YouTube algorithm a little, I won't hold it against you if you skip to the end. I knew what I'm getting into when I decided to keep this episode as it is. Alright, welcome back. If you managed to watch it all until this point, I hope it wasn't too boring. Maybe those sporadic combat moments broke up the monotony a little. Watching the dark fog drones get blasted away by the plasma cannon can be rather satisfying, since it does damage over an area, so if the units are bunched up enough, we can blast away quite a few of them in one shot. Switching to the new ammo type was definitely a good decision. Anyways, let's talk about what's coming next. We did manage to fully envelop the planets in a couple systems, and the next one on the list is Osiris. Don't worry, I will do this while off camera, and pick things up again when I'm done with that. As for what we will do on camera, it will likely involve the production of the quantum chips. I've been procrastinating on that for way too long, and it is the single biggest bottleneck we have. That's what's holding back the rockets, the science, and many other things. We really need to get on top of it. Thankfully, now that we managed to cover a lot of real estate with shields, maybe I will be a lot more eager to do this. The thought of doing the emitters was what kept me back from going for it. Now I have no excuse. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will also help letting me know that the video was worth making. If you would like to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them. And if you want to give a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next one.